Hi, my name is Courtney Chot, and the topic I will talk about is sex education. What is sex education? It's the teaching of human sexuality. Like, for example, intimate relationships, so anyone they're very intimate with, human sexual anatomy, so that'd be like the reproductive parts of the male and reproductive parts of the female, and sexual reproduction, so how children are conceived. Sexual transmitted infections, so that'd be like, for example, HIV and AIDS. Sexual activity, so how much of a person is active in sex. Sexual rotation, so that'd be like straight, bi, gay. So that's what sexual rotation is. Gender identity, so that'd be like male, female, or non-binary. And what non-binary is that they don't identify as male or female. Abstinence, so that'd be like teaching them like not to have sex before marriage. And consumption, so that'd be like teaching them about birth control and condoms. Reproductive rights, so what do males have rights in the reproductive area, and what do females have reproductive rights in the reproductive area. And responsibilities, so what responsibilities do they have before sex, and what responsibilities do they have after sex. And my research question I came up with while doing my research was that should education in schools become more detailed about sexual health? And one side of the argument was like, yes, schools should be more detailed about sexual health. Why is that? Is that students will make safer choices when it comes to sex. Students hopefully won't be misinformed about sex and other topics that fall under that umbrella. It will hopefully decrease the teen pregnancy rates, and also it would hopefully decrease the STD rates. The statistics and data and facts that show that was that according to the CDC in 2013, nearly half of the 19 million cases of STDs occurred among the age group of 15 and 19-year-olds. Even though 92% of males and 90% of female teenagers reported had been taught about STDs, and 89% of males and 88% of female teenagers reported receiving instruction on how to prevent HIV and AIDS. So we're still seeing cases of STDs occur among that age group, even though they're being taught how to prevent it and what are STDs about. So that's why they said we need to be more detailed in sex education. And also another point that supports that is that according to the CDC, teen pregnancies has declined from 117 to 27 from the year of 1990 to 2013. And that's good for us in the US because we're seeing less teen pregnancy births throughout the years, so that's very good. But however, despite all that, the US is still considered the highest rate of teen pregnancy births in the industrialized world. And what I mean by the industrialized world is that globally, we're still the highest. And also, we're in the highest in the in the world because in the UK we are higher by the twice the amount, and also we are also 3 times the amount in Canada. So that's another reason why schools should be more detailed in sex education. Also, in 29 states and the District of Columbia have laws that mandate sex education, but minus of all that them having laws, there is no guarantee that the sex education provided is of high quality or covers the topics young people need to learn about staying healthy. And the effect of all that is that fewer than half of high schools and only 1/5 of middle schools are teaching the topics of sexual health that is essential for the healthy of young people according to the CDC. So these are the facts that are showing that schools should be more detailed in sex education. And who supports this, right? Who supports that schools should be more detailed in sex education? This group called C ISIS, a group that supports and advocates for the rights of all the people to accurate information, comprehensive sexual education, and the full spectrum of sexual and reproductive health services, and also Planned Parenthood. A Planned Parenthood, if you don't know, is the national leading provider of affordable healthcare for women, men, and young people, and also the nation's largest provider of sex education. So these are the groups that support sex education. And another set of arguments like no, schools should not be more detailed in sex education. Why is that? Is that the programs are being funded, but they're not showing results. Some schools already have a fixated educational system according to their standards. And who supports for schools not being more detailed in sexual health curriculum? Is the Utah House of Education Committee and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The statistics and data and facts that support that argument was that research was done by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. They found that since 1996, over $1 billion in state and federal funding has been occurred for the access-only education. Evidence showing that the approach is ineffective and the absence-only curriculum did not result in a positive outcome for the sexual health education. So they're seeing that they put all these dollars in, but they're not showing results that are good to the health and human services standards. So that's why their funding is becoming very limited over the years in the sexual health education. And also another point is that in 22 states they require if they provide sex and or HIV education must be medically and faculty or clinically accurate to their state's definition of medically accurate from and that varies from Department of Health Review curriculum or accuracy to mandate the curriculum be based on information from the published authorities upon which may rely. So what the fact is talking about is that these 22 states will only provide sex education or HIV education to their standards only, not according to the CDC's. So that's where it can be a problem because some states will have more topics than other states that will help the students in their sexual health. And the current status in the US and Texas is that there was a HB 177, a bill in Utah that was introduced earlier this year would have updated the Utah's health education curriculum by requiring schools to teach consent, sexual violence, behavior prevention, sexual assault, resources strategies, right? So that would help everyone understand what sexual assault is and what sexual violence is and the strategies that does happen to you, you know what resources are provided for you. But that bill ended up being rejected by the Utah House of Education Committee by a vote of 7 to 4. So that is not really good because in Utah, we're seeing that they don't really provide much of a sexual educational service in their state. And another point is that in New York schools, they don't require teaching of sex education, but however they do teach HIV and AIDS instruction that is required. And also in their curriculum, it's not required to include instruction on sexual orientation or gender identity. So they're literally missing 2 out of the 19 topics that are essential for young people's sexual health in New York. But a positive one that we see is that in Cornell, Texas, for the first time in 2 decades, the Texas Board of Education voted to make a major change to their state's sex education standards by expanding the teaching of birth control beyond the absence-only education for middle school students. So if a student is not in the absent only education, but they're in another sexual health um education, they will be provided birth control education. So that's very good to see. And those are the current status in the US and Texas. My opinion on this is that yes, schools should be more detailed in sex education. And reasons why I believe is that students will have a better understanding of themselves. And what I mean by that is that students won't be confused about themselves and their sexuality. And students will have a good understanding of sex. What I mean by that is that students would understand what sex is rather than what the movies show them and what websites show them. So they would have a better understanding than what they're shown in the media. So that's my opinion on schools on their sex education. And these are my sources cited.